Welcome to today's webinar, The Science and Practice to Be the Boss Everyone Wants to Work For. This webinar is sponsored by the Emory Alumni Association and Alumni Career Services. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. My name is Sarah Rawls, Director of Alumni Career Services at the Emory Alumni Association, and I am very pleased to let you know that today we have on the line William Gentry, PhD and 2000 graduate of Emory College, and Jodie Charlop, who is an 82 Oxford graduate and 85 college grad. And I'm especially excited to have Jodie with us today. If you all have been loyal followers of the Alumni Career Services webinar program, you know that Jodie was one of the founders, and she's a frequent presenter. We have many of her past webinars archived on the Emory University YouTube channel. And as a reminder, today's webinar will be recorded, so if you have to duck out at any point, don't worry. The session will be housed on the Emory University YouTube channel in the Career Webinars playlist, which now has over 70 past webinars that touch on a variety of career-related subjects. And I do want to let you all know that we're trying something new here today because we are celebrating William's book, and he is very social media savvy. We encourage you, if you are on Twitter, to use the hashtag #BeTheBossBook, the hashtag that's up on the screen here right now. We encourage you to write in your questions or comments for Bill and for Jodie through that hashtag, and I will be monitoring that. But for those of you who prefer not to use Twitter, we will be taking questions in the question area of the GoToWebinar control panel. So please write me there with your questions or concerns if you can't hear us or having trouble seeing the slides. And I do want to let you know, if you are having any issues with GoToWebinar, you may want to try closing out any other applications running on your screen, as that can at times slow things down. And let me tell you a bit more about our presenters today. As I said, William Gentry, PhD, is a 2000 graduate of Emory College and the Director of Leadership Insights and Analytics and a Senior Research Scientist at the Center for Creative Leadership. He also trains CCL's Maximizing Your Leadership Potential and Assessment Certification Workshop programs. And in addition to that, Bill is an adjunct professor at several colleges and universities. And Jodie Charlop, as I said, is a veteran on the Alumni Career Services webinar program. She's also founder of Potential Matters and Acceleration Partners, and she's a coaching partner to the Alumni Association. So after this webinar, if you feel that a coaching relationship is something you'd like to enter into, please reach out to me or go on our website to look over Jodie's bio along with some other of our partner coaches who are happy to work with you. And Jodie specializes in working with professionals who have at least 10 years of experience and who want to take greater control over their career future. So again, thank you all for joining us. And Jodie, I'll now turn it over to you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Greetings, fellow alums and colleagues. I'm just so delighted to be here. And I'm actually delighted to be here on the other side of the expert panel with someone that I truly, truly admire. I've just been, gosh, Bill, I was thinking, how long has it been since we first connected as alums?
Years.
Maybe
7 to 10 years, yeah.
You've always been part, it just seems like you've always been part of my knowledge circle. And so Bill and I have been kindred spirits and connected colleagues as folks. I think, Bill, you reached out to me originally when we were talking about coaching and leadership and just really, as we do with our alumni network, just great connection. And since that time, you've just been a hugely valuable part of my knowledge circle. You know, obviously, Bill does great work and great research. His firm, Center for Creative Leadership, is also one of the most respected organizations for leadership learning and development. But what I just have to add one more thing. One of the things I really, truly love about Bill is that he's so open source and kind of believes in abundance and sharing. So again, a trusted source for me. But when Bill and I first met, it was just so clear to me, Bill, that you were so passionate about new leaders and the challenges they face. So you know, I've been a fan and have followed your work and was just waiting so I could use it for my emerging leaders, and so delighted that Be the Boss Everyone Wants to Work For, a Guide for New Leaders is out, because I'm a big fan of distributing copies to some of my new emerging leaders. So just really think it's an important topic. It's my first webinar with you, Bill, and I'm delighted to be here as your co-contributor. And speaking of first, why don't you take it from here?
Thank you. Well, I'm really excited. I love Emory, and I love being able to help all of us Emory alums out there. So thanks, Jodie, for that great introduction. And what we're going to do, I mean, I'll be talking a lot about you know, what the research says and what the book's all about and stuff, but it's really hoping to have just kind of a guided conversation between me and Jodie. So yeah, there's going to be slides, but I didn't want to inundate you with all sorts of bullet points and stuff. It's just kind of just a way to really talk about what the topics are, and we can go a little bit deeper into it for the next, you know, 50 some odd minutes that we have left together. So what I want to make sure that the three main things that we cover and what Jodie and I are going to be talking about is helping people kind of set the stage for why first-time managers and new leaders are just so important for any sort of leadership pipeline, for any sort of organizational success. And then secondly, based on the research that I've done here and when I've trained new leaders, and Jodie will be talking about this as well from her experience of coaching new leaders and training new leaders herself, what are the 6 important topics these first-time managers and new leaders have to consider, and what I call flip. And I'll be talking about what that flip is and the red thread throughout everything that you're going to learn. And if there's one thing that you learn and take away from this, of how you go from this incredible individual contributor, this rock star, this producer of things, to now having to lead, it's flipping your script. And I'll be talking about what that is and the 6 types of ways you can flip your script to be successful in your new leadership role. And finally, it's not just talking about that, but it's providing you, hopefully, some sort of tools, some walk-away things that you can apply into your job as soon as this webinar is over. So practical, actionable, research-based tips. And as Sarah talked about before, we're going to try something new. If you are Twitter savvy and like using Twitter, please feel free to follow me at lead_better. You can also follow my organization. I work at CCL, ccl.org. We're number 4 in the world at executive education and leadership development. And just kind of like what Jodie said, we are a research-based institution that is as open source as we can be to help all new leaders out there, wherever you are in the leadership spectrum, wherever you are in the world. And then use the hashtag #BeTheBossBook. We'll try to, I feel it's a great way to stay connected with people, even people that you've never met face-to-face before. We can still stay connected in that. So with that, that's what we're going to try to do. Again, if you have any questions, use that hashtag, follow me, continue the conversation afterwards, or use the chat function as well. We really want to try to be of service to those here on the call. And as Jodie talked about first, and if you think about the first thing you ever did, these firsts that we all have, firsts leaves a really just indelible impression on you. And thinking about, you know, my first night being at Emory and all the things I did, and I lived in Dobbs Hall there. It was called the Pit back then. I don't know if it's still called the Pit now, but it was the absolute basement floor of Dobbs, and every time I go back there, it just brings back memories and still smells like it did, even though when we were there it was all men, and now I think it's probably all female now. But it just, these first reminds us of certain things. And you know, if you think about the first car that you ever had. Jodie, do you remember the first car that you ever had?
Absolutely. 72 Chevrolet Impala forest green with a CB, if I'm going to really date myself.
But I bet you still I bet you still remember how you sat in it and what the steering wheel felt like.
And it was the greatest vehicle because we could pile a ton of people in it at Emory, and despite other folks having a newer vehicle, my vehicle was always the one to take to the next destination. So, yep. Totally.
Well, mine, I actually named it. It was the Major General, and everybody on campus knew it. In fact, the funny story is, it got stolen the night before I was supposed to turn in my honors thesis. So like a week and a half, 2 weeks before graduation, got stolen from Peavine Deck. And everybody, all my friends went, "What happened?" They were just so heartbroken. But they found it at Georgia Tech like a week later. But we sold it off, and I just like you said, Jodie, friends piled into it. I loved it. I loved that vehicle. I still remember how it felt. I still remember all those things. All these firsts are just so important. And if you think about the first time you ever do anything, how much you remember it. And if you think about these people who've managed for the first time, it leaves an indelible impression on all of us who are managing now, like that first time that we ever had to take over this leadership role. And that idea is not lost on a lot of people, particularly CEOs. If you think of what the top challenges for CEOs and organizations are, it's human capital, and it's focusing not on their level, but it's focusing on the absolute ground bottom floor of this leadership pyramid, which is where a lot of first level managers are. And so many of them are managing for the first time. and they are so important to the workforce. You know, they lead a majority of the workforce, lead more people than anybody else in the workforce. They have the biggest impact on all sorts of key HR metrics like customer satisfaction and employee engagement. You know, me as a first-time manager myself, I feel this, and I know that I have such an impact on the way that my team is engaged, and if my team is engaged and if my team is satisfied, they're going to do really great things. So I feel that impact every single day, and I know that, you know, these people at these first levels of leadership, they're your bench strength and they're your next generation of leaders. Jodie, do you have any insight on kinds of things that when you talk to business leaders, how they feel about that first levels of managers, particularly those who've never managed before?
Well, I mean, I look at it from a couple of different things. Having a good, strong bench is really everything, because as I coach up the executive chain, and I'm very blessed to have a very robust practice where I coach emerging leaders, new leaders through my partnership with Emory, and so I get a lot, all the way up to the CEO for the past 14 years, and absolutely building strong bench strength. And as leaders are looking out, they know they need to stay forward-facing to the organization. So the more they can build that leadership pipeline and develop people, the more the organization is going to thrive. But on the flip side, it's just that first leadership is just such a very stressful time for new leaders, because I know on one hand we are so really proud of kind of arriving to kind of our first role. And, you know, I mean, I can only call back to my first leadership assignment. I was so proud to be promoted, and I had the title, and I got a seat at the leadership table, but I didn't even know what good leadership was. And, you know, my first family experience didn't bring me that. You know, my dad was a bit of an entrepreneur, and, you know, my first leader in my first management role was a micromanaging control freak, so I got a lot of not so great habits. And so, but it's really fascinating to me, and you and I've talked about this in our dialogues, that, you know, research shows that most professionals don't even get leadership training, good quality leadership training, until they're 42. And even then, you know, it's like it's survival of the fittest. So that's why I think your book is so important, because I think if we're going to build healthy organizations, and it's certainly something I talk about every day in coaching leaders, we've got to build the next generation of leaders. So it's great that you're bringing this resource, because the earlier we can do it, the more powerful, you know, these new leaders can be in really transforming their careers, their community, their businesses, and obviously the communities in which we live. So huge issue, I think.
Yeah, and I think that really sets a great context. You know, if they're so important, you know, I've talked about from my perspective, Jodie's talked about from her perspective. Well, we need to train and develop them. If they're so important to all sorts of key indicators, they're important for the future, we need to train and develop them. But as Jodie mentioned, you know, and what the studies out there are showing, almost 60% of people who get promoted into their first leadership position get nothing. As one of my friends said, you know, he said that, you know, he got promoted into leadership, his boss shook his hand, said, "Congratulations, you're going to be a manager on Monday, now don't screw up." And that was his leadership development training. And even those who actually do get training get 2 to 5 times less, way less than middle-level managers or senior-level executives who have more tenure, more knowledge, more experience doing that. And as Jodie mentioned before, another statistic that really hit pretty hard for me, to really resonate the fact that we're struggling in terms of fulfilling this leadership pipeline. A lot of the average age of people who are promoted in their first leadership position is 30. The average age of people who go through their first development training is 42. So a lot of us are left on average 12 years floundering, not getting any help, not getting any support, and for me, that's just unacceptable. And if organizations really want to say that we develop leaders, are you doing it? And that's why I wanted to try to write this book, because it doesn't matter if you're a chemist or an engineer, or you're an IT professional, or you're in sales, if you're a researcher, you know, if you work in the government, if you work in the public sector, private sector, it doesn't matter what you do. You get promoted based on all the great things that you do as an individual contributor. And when you get promoted into that leadership role for the first time in your life, it is probably the biggest psychological and emotional shift that you're ever going to experience in your career, because it's totally different than anything that you've ever done before. And that's why I really want to bring this book to light. How can we help people who on average don't get any leadership development training, have to wait 12 years to get even the first glimpse of what it means to be developed as leaders? What can I do to help those people out there who are struggling for 12 years, who are struggling right now trying to figure out, how do I lead teams better? How do I even go from the transition from being a peer to now being a boss? You know, what are even the skills that I need to focus on in the first place to get feedback, or to know how to give feedback, or how to deal with change? Where do I even begin? So that's kind of where I wanted this, my whole research around it is to help those sorts of people. And the way I think about it, as I said before, if there's one thing that you get out of this webinar, it's this. And we talk about first before. I want you to think about the first time you ever felt like this with anybody. And this is kind of what I tell people. You know, the red thread throughout this is, if you can think about the first time you ever fell in love with anybody, and they say, how does this even get into leadership? Well, I'll tell you. If you think about the first time you ever fell in love with anybody and you thought you would live with this person for the rest of your life. Now, some of us are very fortunate that we're still with this person, so what I'm going to say probably doesn't resonate as well. But for the vast majority of us, me included, we know that this didn't really last, and there is something that happens when you go from this to this. And you know, somebody's going to get dumped. And really what happens is, when you are about to get dumped and you're about to dump somebody, you use these 5 words: it's not you, it's me. I've heard it a lot. And so if you think about the phrase, it's not you, it's me, you know, think about, where is the focus and attention when somebody says it's not you, it's me? What they're really saying is, it's not about you, it's about me. And when you put that into a leadership context, or when you put that into a work context, that is a lot of what the script is for individual contributors. It's not about you, it's about me. And I know Jodie has a lot of really strong feelings about this, because producers of products, people who bring in the money, people who do all the work and do it well, they have an "it's not you, it's me" script. You know, I keep my head down, I work harder than anybody else, I know things, I bring in the money, I bring in the business, I bring in the ideas, I rely on my technical skill and my savvy and my motivation, my dedication. All of those things make me successful. And I'm sure, Jodie, that's true with a lot of the people who are strong individual contributors that you know who get promoted into leadership. Is that right?
Absolutely. I think that, you know, we get promoted because we deliver well, but producing is not leading, and leading is about, as you say, flipping that mindset to really begin. It's not about you. It's about being a catalyst to how you're able to multiply your effect of producing much more broadly. But we get into that me mode, and that it really is that first mega mind shift from producer to manager to leader of the me. And I always say it's pretty simple, with even without research. It's, you know, when you're producing it and you're responsible for it, it's about me, what I do, how I do it, when I do it, who I do it for, making sure I deliver. And then when you kind of move up or become more effective, it's about you and me. You know, meaning you have some stuff, I have some stuff to do, and together we should be able to do it. But when you step into that leader chair, it really is about we as a collective group, how we're mobilizing, how we're doing, because we can do something bigger, better, greater. And I think we conceptually kind of get that, because we want great leaders that inspire. And, you know, I always have this great little exercise I do where we talk about, you know, in our emotional intelligence class, which talks about, you know, what a great leader looks like and how they make you feel. And then I say, okay, now this is the list of all the things you really need and want to do. Now, how are you doing? And it's like, oh, yeah, it's like a big aha. It's like, I want this for myself.
Right.
So how do we take it from the me to more the collective we, because we can do more powerful things together?
And that's the red thread that I try to get throughout the book. It's, again, if there's one thing that you take away from this, I hope that you understand that this script, this "it's not you, it's me" script, it's worked for us ever since we were kids. It's worked for us in elementary school, grade school. It got us into Emory. It got us into our first jobs. It got us really successful. You know, my skills and my talents and my smarts got me my education, got me my first job. The way I interviewed the people that I know, all those things about me made me successful. And it got me raises and bonuses and promotions, and there is nothing wrong at all with having that script.
Absolutely.
And it's worked. And as Jodie said, it's worked. And so many of us think, well, if it's worked for us before, why won't it work in leadership? It's got to. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So we continue to think, if we just focus on "it's not you, it's me," and focus just on me, my skills, my talents, if it's worked for us before, we're going to keep on climbing the corporate ladder. And what we see here at the Center for Creative Leadership over 40 years plus of research, we're one of the preeminent thinkers around how people derail in their career. And what I mean by derailing is they had all the knowledge, skills, and abilities to make it to the top of the organization, to make it to that corner office. But somehow, some way, something happened where their career derailed, meaning they flamed out, they burned out, they got demoted, they stopped progressing, they got fired. What are some reasons why? What are some behaviors why? And the number one behavior that I've done in my research that consistently stands out, doesn't matter if you're male, female, man, woman, upper levels of management, just into management, public sector, private sector, U.S., India, China, Brazil, doesn't matter where you are in the world, the one thing that sticks out, the one behavior that derailed managers have that really sticks out, it's what we call a too narrow functional orientation. What that means is, I'm a researcher, I'm a kick-ass researcher, I know what to do, and I'm really good at it, and now I get promoted into leadership, and I can't get out of that research mode. Or same thing, I'm a great engineer, I'm a rock star engineer, and when I get promoted into leadership, I can't stop being an engineer and start doing the things that a leader of engineers need to do. How does that resonate with you, Jodie?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I coach emerging leaders and even executive leaders that have achieved, or they'll move into a new organization where perhaps they've been in an organization that's been more technically minded and they've grown up and they've built relationships, but you walk across the hall and all of a sudden, or walk across the way into a new role, new job, new leadership, which will come in time. I mean, we have on average 11 jobs in our lifetime. And so it is that, again, that orientation. Absolutely. The other thing we're seeing too in terms of, you know, as I'm coaching, we're seeing much more, you've got to shift the mindset before you can build the tool set and the skills to do it, because you can have all these disparate skills, but if you don't flip to begin to think about that leadership mindset, you know, it's just at some point you're going to hit that ceiling. And so the faster you can begin to leverage these skills to begin to think like a leader, and that's the thing I tell my emerging leader classes, it's like leadership is from any chair, and the people that I have seen that have cultivated that mindset will advance farther faster. Doesn't mean you can't get ahead with not having some of these skills, because producers do get to certain levels, but to be powerful, to be really into the next level, to be sought after, you really got to really focus on that. So
yeah. And with that, I think we have a poll coming up. I'm going to ask Sarah, is that poll ready? I'd love to have, Jodie and I both would love to see where kind of people think about their, as we talk about firsts, how people see their first leadership position.
Yeah, so you should see the poll on your screen now. Take a second and tell us, reflecting back on your first leadership role, how would you rate yourself? Would you give yourself an A, B, C, F? We just took out D, because if you're at a D, you're probably going to say F. Or have you not served in this type of role yet, which we understand, and good for you for coming out beforehand.
Yeah, no, we have a couple questions that hopefully we'll be able to answer, particularly around, you know, if I want to be in this position, how do I transition into this role? How do I prepare ahead so I can get this role as a leader and be successful? What the second half of this webinar is going to show you, as I said, 6 ways in order to think about that and do that.
All right, so we have, everyone has voted. We appreciate you sending in your response. I'm pretty amazed here. You'll see the results up on the screen. Well, no one rated themselves at an A, which I'm not surprised by that, but 31% gave themselves a B, 62% said C, no one gave themselves an F, which is good.
That's good.
And just 8% have not served in this role yet, so most of the people online have served in leadership roles. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's really great, because I think with Bill's work, and I think there's such a great runway that we can begin preparing for. So.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. When I talk to leaders out there, there are so few of us that need to do a complete 180. It's just about minor tweaks, you know, polishing off some rough edges. You can still be the type of person you are, still be authentic and genuine, but it's really thinking about things differently, doing things a little bit differently, out of your comfort zone and out of the normal everyday routine that you have. That's what's going to make you successful as a leader. You don't have to completely do an overhaul. So, as I said before, the the red thread and the thing that you need to remember about this is flip your script. And what I said before, the script of so many great individual contributors and producers out there is like that old breakup line, it's not you, it's me. And for leaders, they need to flip their script, and they need to stop thinking about it's not you, it's me, and flip it. Now they need to think, it's not about me anymore. That's the script that you have to flip, and everything that you do and the script that you have as a leader, if that is your mantra, if that is your kind of one key thought, it's not about me anymore, you're going to do great. And based on the research I've done on around 300 new leaders that have been out there as the basis of the book, these are the 6 different aspects of your script that you need to flip. Jodie's already mentioned the mindset part. We're going to talk about that. We'll also talk about the skill set that you need to flip. How do you flip your relationships? How do you go from being a peer to being a boss? How do you go from being a friend, to being a boss? How do you go from, how do I even lead a team in the first place? How do I go from being a team member to now leading a team? How do I flip my do-it-all attitude? As a producer, I'm known for doing everything. How do I stop doing that and start doing the things that leaders need to do? How do I flip my perspective? And we'll talk about what that means in terms of politics. And then how do I flip my focus? How do I make sure that everything I do and say is the right thing to do? How do I lead with my character, integrity, and tact? How do I lead from an authentic, genuine point of view? So Jodie and I are going to talk about these 6 flips in the last half of the webinar that we have. The first flip that I saw through the research was flipping your mindset, and Jodie's already talked about this before. You have to think differently when you become a leader. And again, it doesn't matter whether you're in it right now, whether you are a manager of people who are managing for the first time and helping them develop, or if you want to try to get into a leadership position soon. This is one of the first key things that you really have to think about and do, flipping your mindset. And where this research came out, I was able to ask the almost 300 first-time managers and new leaders who've come through our programs. I asked them on a survey, tell me about your motivation for learning and development. And there were some questions that tapped into, I'm coming to learn and develop, and I want to learn and develop. I'm motivated to learn and develop because, like that first bullet says, it's going to bring me recognition, and it's going to help me stand out from the crowd. That's more of an it's not you, it's me mindset. And again, there's nothing wrong with it, and that is a motivation all of us have. But there's another motivation that we all have as well. Why do we learn and develop? Because I find learning fun, I find it enjoyable, I find it intrinsically pleasing to me. And what we found in the research was the people and the first-time managers who had that second type of motivation, because I find it fun and enjoyable, they were the ones who were more successful, they were the ones who were more effective. If these new leaders had that first type of motivation, I'm learning because it's going to bring me recognition, and it's going to help me stand out from the crowd. If that was your leading motivation for learning and development, you were seen as less effective in your role. So even thinking about why you're learning, thinking about the difference between having a fixed mindset where I need to be perfect at everything versus a growth mindset where, it's okay if I make mistakes and I need to learn from my mistakes, and being aware of my strengths and weaknesses. Having that sort of growth mindset is what is hugely important for leaders to be effective. In our research, we even saw the way that new leaders talked to themselves was different, and it was quantitatively different in terms of their effectiveness. A lot of us, when we talk to ourselves, we say, Bill, I can do this, or I'm able to do this, or some of us say, you can do this, Bill, you are able to do this. And what we found was the way people talk to themselves, if they're able to use that you and your second person pronoun, they were seen as more effective by their bosses and their peers. The people who talk to themselves and used I and me and my, as in like, I can do this, I'm great, I'm going to be able to do this. Again, those are great things to tell ourselves, but if you're using those first-person pronouns, you in fact were seen as less effective in your role and more likely to derail in your career. So even the way that we talk about ourselves and getting away from an it's not you, it's me mindset and script to thinking more about you and your, thinking more objectively about things, that's going to be hugely important. And I know Jodie has some thoughts about mindset and what the types of mindsets you need to have.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I come into it. I mean, I see it, and I think sometimes when we're growing up in an organization, we get a little latitude because we have relationships, and people don't notice it as much. But just had a great coaching engagement that I'm still working on, and with a new VP coming into an organization. Again, so excited to share her knowledge, her info, her insights. but in that first, in that first onboarding, just focused on I, a lot of what she knew, and just even flipping the common language to us and we made a huge difference of how people received her and brought her in. It wasn't her versus them or me versus you. It was really just that slight tweak, how it just really, makes people receive you differently. You feel part of the conversation. And so I just agree. I think you got to flip your mindset that it really is. There's, again, going from that expert, me, I know stuff, it's about me. And it's so funny, I had one client that I was talking with that said, I finally got it. Here I am. I made it all the way up there to a place where I thought my opinions were going to matter, and the first thing leadership said is, what are other people thinking? So it really is so paradoxical, but you got to move through that. It's good to achieve, it's good to get outcomes, it's good to get results, but really to be that catalyst, to be that really impact player. And it's funny because you even look at the language of why do I do it, and even saying because I want to have impact, greater impact, collective impact, just beginning to flip that mindset is really, really important.
Yep. That's kind of a great kind of summary of what it means to really flip your mindset and how we think about things differently, and how we as new leaders even need to talk differently, not just to the people around us, but talk to ourselves as well. The second flip, based on the research that we're going to be talking about, is flipping your skill set. Of the almost 300 new leaders who came, we were able to measure how effective they were at certain skills, and also whether those skills were even important for success in the first place. For us, and when I develop leaders personally, it's like there are hundreds and hundreds of skills that you need to focus on. And if you're new into leadership right now and you've never done it before, or you're wanting to transition in that role and trying to prepare to get ahead, where should you focus on to be effective in leadership? What are the 2 or 3 kind of key skills that you really need to focus on? Because so many of us get promoted into leadership because of our technical skill, and what we've already discussed today, if you keep focusing on the technical side of things, you're going to derail in your career. So there are certain skills that are much different in that leadership role that you have to flip in order to be effective. And based on the research, we were able to see that several stood out, and I'm going to talk about 2 of them particularly now in terms of flipping your skill set. One is communication, and the other is influence. And at Emory, I was very lucky to study under Steve Nowicki and Marshall Duke in the psych department. And great friends with Mark McLeod, who just retired from the counseling center. And their studies were just so instrumental to me in terms of how to communicate well, especially around that nonverbal communication aspect. And for so many of us, we try to communicate with others the way we like to be communicated with. We like to influence others the way we like to be influenced. And what I tell new leaders is, you have to flip that totally. It's not about the way we like to be communicated with. It's about the way our audience wants to be communicated with. So we have to be in tune to every single nonverbal behavior, action that you are both expressing and that you are receiving. And it can be as obvious or as explicit as a facial expression or a smile or the tone of voice, but you have to be also cognizant of what is that person's posture, what are their gestures, what are their, as I said, facial expressions, tone of voice, the amount of space they're giving you, the amount of time that they're giving you to talk, all of those things. And as a leader, you need to be able to take perspectives on people and have that empathy to understand what that person's going through. And one of the key pieces of research I've done in my studies of leaders around the world is empathy actually does matter. The more empathetic leaders are seen to be, from our research, we have showed that they are better performers, more promotable, less likely to derail. And in some countries, that positive relationship is even more important. And so the ability to have empathy can be enhanced, and it really falls back on that nonverbal communication aspect. Are you able to read the emotions of other people and use that to put yourself in that person's perspective? And that is a great foundation for the influence that you have to have. I tell people, a lot of us follow the golden rule that our parents taught us, or our elders taught us, our mentors taught us: treat others the way you want to be treated. And then when it comes to influence, that would mean that you would want to influence others the way you want to be influenced. If I get influenced by all sorts of data and facts and figures, that is going to be my go-to way of influencing people. But when it comes to leadership, there are so many people who could not care less about data and facts and figures. And if you're trying to influence them through a channel of influence that they do not listen to, nor do they want to even care about, you're going to fail as a leader. You need to open up your ability to influence others through different avenues. Maybe it's, as I said, if it's not through the head, through data, facts, and figures, maybe it's through the heart. Maybe it's through how does this decision affect us, our values, our belief system, the people around us, or how can I influence people not just through the head or the heart, but through the hands? You know, if we do this collaboratively, how can we work together to do this? That's the way that leaders really need to flip their skill set and understand it's not about what my preferences are anymore, it's about what my audience's preferences are. I know Jodie's worked a lot with people, you know, how do you flip that skill set from being a technical expert to now doing something much different?
Yeah, no, I really enjoy helping the technically brilliant and relationally challenged, because you always say, everybody comes in and say, why are you coaching or why are you taking this course? I want to be influential. And I always say, well, the paradox of influence, it's not about you. It's a byproduct of the relationships, the mindset, the way you operate with people. So, you know, we want it, but it's really it's a strategy of how we relate, connect, and build relationships with people and how they receive us. So it's just very, very important.
Yep, definitely. So if you're in the midst of being in this first leadership position, hopefully you've gotten a couple ideas of how I need to think differently, the type of skills I need to do differently or to even enhance. If you're wanting to get into leadership, maybe you can start thinking about how can I start to communicate better to build my brand. And I know Jodie near the end is going to talk how important having a brand is, and how can that be part of who I am, so people know that I'm able to communicate with a lot of people, I'm able to influence in many different ways. So those are just a couple things you can start thinking about.
Also, Bill, just even focusing on the emotional intelligence component, so much great work in addition to really focusing on your EI abilities, because this is where it's really going to start counting. The more you can build those skills on top of that technical greatness or that ability to do the job, but that's where I think this really begins to matter and build that strong foundation.
Definitely. And as we've said before, just having the technical skills, is if you just rely on that, your career is going to derail. You need to get those EQ skills like empathy. It actually does matter from our research. Over 30,000 plus leaders, it does matter to one's performance and promotability. So the third flip, we talked about mindset, we talked about skill set. Now we're going to talk about relationships. You know, how do you go from, hey, I've been on this team, it's Friday, I just got promoted. Maybe this weekend, one of my coworkers, my buddies, my peers, we're going to hang out this weekend, have them over for a barbecue, our kids play soccer together. Now on Monday, I have to manage those people. How do I go from being a peer or even, as I say, being BFFs to now being a boss? How do I go about doing that? And when I surveyed the challenges that these new leaders had, we asked them, what are your top 3 challenges that you're dealing with right now? The number one challenge that came out, almost 60% of them said, I'm going through that same exact situation I just said. How do I go from being a peer or being a friend to now being a boss? And so one of a couple of things for people to think about is how it's the leader's role to be proactive in forming that relationship. You can't just sit back and just assume that your former peers, now direct reports, are going to adjust. You need to head on, you need to address that situation. So it's being clear in terms of, hey, you know, we can still be friends unless there's some sort of written rule in your HR manual that says you can never be friends with other people, especially your direct reports. You can still be friends with them. However, you need to make sure that they understand their role and your role in this new working relationship. And you need to be very transparent and very clear, not just to your friends, but to everybody that you manage. This is the way I'm going to manage. This is how I'm going to reward performance. This is how I'm going to be a great manager for each and every one of you, not just my friends. And that is a very tough transition to make. And it's a very tough transition to make as well, to go from being part of that team to now leading a team. And what I tell people in terms of what sort of things can I do to now lead a team, if you can think of these 3 different, words, and we call it our DAC model here at the Center for Creative Leadership. The best leaders out there provide D and A and C to their teams. D stands for direction, A stands for alignment, and C stands for commitment. the best leaders that you've ever worked for. They have provided direction. They tell you this is where we need to go and this is why it's so important. So everybody knows the direction that our team is heading. The A part is alignment. The best leaders that you've worked for let you know what your role and responsibility is and why you are so important to our success. And then the C stands for commitment. How are you able to motivate people, get people committed 100% every single second of every single day? That's what the DAC model kind of lets you provide. So if you as a leader are kind of struggling with making that transition from being a peer to being a supervisor, or if you're struggling with how do you build a team while trying to still kind of maintain that sort of, hey, I'm the boss, this is what we need to do, think about how you can provide direction and alignment and commitment every single day to the people that you lead and serve. That's going to put you well off in terms of flipping your relationships.
No, absolutely.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think also it's, this is a really important element because I don't think as human beings we do dual relationships well. And coming back to the empathy, there's a natural, if there was only one chair, and 90% of leaders go through this. I mean, it's a staggering amount. There's at some point you're gonna grow and you're gonna oversee or manage or lead your peers. And I think coming back to that empathy, this is a new relationship. Somebody may be perceiving a loss, but it really is in many ways using your EI to understand you're both going through a changed relationship, and now it's not this or that, and so we have to co-create something new. So it's a great place where we're now practicing candor and pivotal conversations and other growth opportunity because you're redefining a new relationship. So just we change as people, we change as relationships.
One of the things that I learned from Steve Nowicki, who again is in the psych department at Emory's, taught a couple of business school classes too, all relationships go through a phase of choice, beginning, deepening, and ending. And when you go from being a peer to being a boss, that relationship has ended. And it's your choice and the other person's choice too, how to begin that new relationship in this new phase. Yeah. So we talked about mindset, skill set, relationships. The next flip you need to do is your do-it-all attitude. Again, for many people, it's easier for me just to do all the work. Plus, I like doing the work. I love doing the work. It's who made me successful. How do I go from that and walking that fine line between doing the work and managing others doing the work that needs to be done? Because as a leader, you face it, you can't do everybody's work. And even if you do everybody's work and you do it faster and you do it better, what sort of messages are you telling your people? If you're taking work away from them that you can do quicker, faster, better, you're telling them that, look, I don't think you can do this. I think you're incapable, and I don't trust you to do the work. That's what you're telling them. So if you're thinking about how do I even go about getting and making sure that I don't have to do all the work anymore and letting go of doing the work, even though it's much easier and faster for me to do it, think about how you can delegate and think about how you can develop others. This is the major flip that I personally am struggling with right now as a new leader, as a first-time manager. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. I love doing the research. It's what's made me successful, and it's my identity. And now I have to let some of that go. I have to let a lot of that go in order to manage my team that needs to be doing the work, because I can't do the work anymore. I just can't. All of our team is going to suffer if I'm the one doing the work. So how am I able as a leader to model the appropriate behaviors for them to do the work? How can I even think about, as a coach, as a mentor, as a developer of others, using the passion that I have in terms of research and being an IO psychologist and helping them in their work and providing feedback? Feedback is so important, and I know that, Jodie, you can go ahead and talk about kind of what you think about in terms of developing others and feedback.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that this, just talking about producing and kind of moving over, developing others, I mean, I see this all the way up. I mean, this is a life skill, a lifelong professional skill that you're developing. And a lot of times I'll even say to leaders, even senior leaders, how much time are you spending in your day producing, how much time spending managing, and how much time spending leading? Because your job now is not the doing. Your job is the leading. It is about giving the feedback and setting the direction and the other things that leaders do. So coming back and tying it all together with mindset, it's about the empathy of understanding where people are and how they're doing it. But as you think about it, getting out of that production trap, again, this is a big derailer. you know, getting the job and keeping the job, not promoting yourself mentally to say, I'm now in the leader role. And it takes, you know, it's not going to happen overnight. As you said on Friday, hey, now I'm produced, and now I went from being a producer to a leader. You have to evolve and work with your team to figure out how you're going to do that. But if you don't create space to lead, you will not be a leader. And so I think it really is mission critical, because your task is to develop others. Developing others is on your to-do list every day.
And that's what I tell my team. It's like I tell the people on my team, my job right now is to make sure that you can take over my job later. And the only way to do that is to develop them and give them feedback. And what we've seen in our research, and we're writing we've just completed the research, writing a white paper right now in terms of how do you provide feedback and what sort of things that you can do. We've seen that the most effective leaders are the ones who provide feedback daily, if not weekly. And the least effective leaders are the ones who provide feedback once a year during the performance appraisals. You need to be giving feedback, and you need to be giving positive, and I call it negative. I'm just going to be very just blunt. It is negative. You need to be giving positive and negative, and you need to be giving more positive than negative feedback in like a 3-to-1, 4-to-1, maybe even a 5-to-1 ratio of the amounts of times that if you give feedback daily, that means you're giving feedback once a day, Monday through Friday. That's 5 times. If you give that feedback daily, 4 of the times that you give feedback, there needs to be something positive about what you're trying to do and giving that positive piece of feedback. You can't just be giving negative feedback every single day. So be on the lookout for some other things that we're doing in terms of feedback to help you understand how to give feedback better. So really quickly, one sort of acronym we at CCL tell people to think about how we can give feedback is through our SBI model. You know, we talked about DAC, direction, alignment, commitment. Now we're talking SBI. S stands for situation, B stands for behavior, and I stands for impact. Whenever you want to give feedback, if you're able to couch it in terms of providing the clear situation that the behavior happened, telling them what that behavior is they want to stop or start or continue to do, and what that behavior's impact was on me personally, or how that behavior impacted the team objectively, or maybe it even impacted the bottom line objectively. And again, this could be positive or negative. If you're able to really serve SBI as a foundation for the way that you give critical feedback, positive and negative, it's really going to take kind of the emotional sting out of it. And if you're able to do that time after time after time, and you're able to give that honest and candid feedback, and you're the type of leader who says, look, I want to make a culture in our team to give feedback. I want to start to give more feedback to people because I realize that as a leader I need to give more feedback. And as a leader I realize that I need to change and I need to be more effective. So if you're able to give me feedback, that's going to be great because I want to better serve you. And if you're able to teach your team this kind of SBI model so that anytime you're giving feedback, peer-to-peer, boss to subordinate, subordinate to boss, it's in that SBI model, people are going to be more willing to use that feedback. And if you're more willing to hear it, they're going to be more willing to hear it when you give it to them.
Hey, I would just say one quick tip I add. At the end of the day, because we are all super busy and we hope we're doing it, but at the end of the day, I have clients that put on their email calendar, or on their calendar, it said, what did I catch my stakeholders, my boss, my peer, even my boss, you know, what did I catch people doing great today? Because if you can embed that habit of gratitude and appreciation in, then you don't have to have hard conversations because people trust you and they know that when you're giving them critical feedback, you're giving it balance, but you got to build in the good daily habits to make sure. So one little simple tip, what did I catch people doing good today that I can appreciate and value? And it's such a simple thing, but such a powerful outcome.
That's right, and that's a great kind of walkaway tool as well. Put it in your calendar. You know, say, you know, on Friday, what did I see my stakeholders, my boss, my team? What did they do, and how can I start crafting these SBIs to give them? And believe me, it's not an easy thing to do. You're not just going to start doing an SBI and do it well. You're going to have to practice, and it takes time. And again, we're not saying it's a 180-degree shift. Just polish some rough edges. So. We got about 5 or so minutes left before I'm going to open it up to Q&A as well. So I'm just going to go through these last two really quickly, and then I'm going to make sure that Jodie and I talk about that kind of leadership brand after we talk about perspective and focus. And so we've talked about how to flip your mindset and your skill set and your relationships and your dual attitude. The fifth part of your script you have to flip is your focus, and that's where I talk about politics and organizational politics. And I'm not talking about this type of politics, and this which is really timely right now with January 20th coming soon, so I'm not talking about this, but when you really think about the word politics and you break it down into its syllables, it really helps you understand what a lot of people think politics is and what we really need to do about it. You know, politics break down to its syllables. Poly means many, and ticks means a bunch of, you know, blood-sucking insects. And that's what a lot of people think politics is. And it's how do I get everything that I want? How do I behave in a way that serves me and only me? How do I bully people to get what I want? There's competing interest, uncertainty, ambiguity. What can I do? And that's what a lot of people think politics is. And what I tell people is they need to flip their thinking about and flip their perspective, thinking about politics is not positive or negative. It's just the air that we breathe. How can we be politically savvy enough to know that I need to understand my perspective, I need to understand your perspective. How can I use that information so that together we can do something to fulfill our mutual goals? It doesn't have to be I win and you lose. It can be we can do something together. So how can I understand my perspective, your perspective, so that we can all gain those goals? And then the final thing we have to flip is our focus. And if we think about focus, it's how do we lead people the right way? And I've done a lot of research on leadership character. It's one of the most fundamentally sound pieces of research that has meant the most to me because it talks about the importance of character. And what we've seen in terms of chief executive officers and presidents of organizations, these are 4 character strengths that are out there in the literature. There's a couple dozen out there, but we focus on these 4. And we saw that each of these alone, integrity, bravery, social intelligence, and perspective, they are critically important character strengths for leaders to have. And in fact, of all 4 of these, integrity is the most important. But we also looked at middle-level managers, and middle-level managers are the management positions that I, as a first-time manager, want to try to aspire to in my next, career move. And what we found was social intelligence was the most important predictor of their success. And when we looked at all 4 of these character strengths together, integrity had nothing to do with the current performance of middle-level managers, and that was very troubling to us in our research. And we thought, why is that? Well, we tend to promote people based on what they are doing currently. And if integrity has nothing to do with their current performance, no wonder we might get people like Ken Lay or Bernie Madoff or Lance Armstrong or Martin Shkreli. No wonder we get organizations that cheat the system, that do things that, Enron or WorldCom or Volkswagen or all the financial crisis that Lehman Brothers led us through, all those certain things, the things that Wells Fargo did recently. Maybe that's why we have such, bad things that happen with lapses of character and integrity. So that's why I really want people to understand, as a leader, it might, integrity might not be at the forefront of your mind every single second of every single day. You, in fact, might not be rewarded for it right now as a first-time manager or a new leader. But for you to build your brand and for you to build your reputation, you've got to have that first and foremost, because it will catch up to you one day. Jodie, do you have any closing thoughts about your leadership brand?
Well, no. People say, how do I take this forward? It's so funny because one of the things I have to sit down with my coachees, particularly if I'm working with up-and-coming leaders and even senior leaders, we'll sit down and do the coaching framework. It's like, let's sit down and figure out how we're going to accelerate your success, how we're going to make sure that you are evolving as the best leader you've been invested in. And it's funny, I just love this framework because you can take these 6 key areas and really make them a great coaching agenda. And so it's just so marvelous to see the research and the real world, intersecting, in terms of the work you're doing on research and the leaders and what they're experiencing, because this is a really rich coaching agenda that new leaders can really use and begin to build their development plan off of. So
yeah. I've had several people say, I don't know where to start. What should I do? And I say, well, there's 2 ways to go about it. One, pick the one that is most relevant for you right now and just do a deep dive into that. A second way is, hey, this is a great 6-week or 6-month, development plan. Work with your leader, and the book is, I really wanted the book to be practical and actionable. So at the end of each of these chapters, there is a coach's corner that says, okay, if you really want to flip your skill set, here are 2 things for you to think about to gain a deeper knowledge into the subject matter, and here are 2 things that you can do on the job right now to make sure that you're flipping your skill set. And for the best leaders out there, and the last thing I want to leave you with before we end the webinar today is a story about somebody who works here at CCL. His name's Jack. Jack works in our distribution department. So if somebody orders something from CCL, he makes sure it goes off the shelf, packs it into the box, and ships it off. If we have a leadership development program in Atlanta, for instance, he makes sure that all the materials are provided for the trainers and puts it in the boxes to be shipped. And a couple Decembers ago, every year at the end of the year, we have a party to really showcase the milestone anniversaries that we've had. And Jack had a 30-year anniversary here a couple years ago, and when you're here for that long, you get to make a speech. And he said, in his role in distribution, he knows that, and I'm going to talk in terms of Jack in the first person like I'm Jack, I know that I'm never going to be able to train a leadership development program. I know that I'm never going to be able to write a book, but if I don't do my job, I know that I'm not helping leaders get better. He clearly sees exactly how his job in distribution makes a contribution, makes an impact in the world. And if we as leaders are able to do that for every single person that we lead and serve, how, you're here, this is your role, this is your responsibility, I'm giving you feedback, I want to, influence you, I want you to be part of the solution, I'm part of the problem, I see you as important, here's how you make a difference in the world. And having that real conversation, and not just kind of playing it off, but having that conversation, letting people know you do make a difference, and here's exactly how you make a difference. If you're able to flip your mindset and your skill set and your relationships and your do-it-all attitude and your perspective and your focus, you're going to be in a much better place to have this sort of conversation, to have people understand, wow, my boss really does think I make a difference. And when my boss makes me feel that way, I'm going to do everything in my power to fulfill what I need to be doing. So that's kind of the last story I want to leave you with. It is possible to do this. It is difficult. You will make mistakes. I'm no lying about that. You will make mistakes, and it's very difficult to do, but it is so valuable to so many other people, and you're going to make a difference in the world, not just to yourself, but to so many other people if you're able to flip your script and do these things differently.
Absolutely.
Jodie, you got any last-minute thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just coming back to what we started with mindset, and the I and why I'm doing this. I think we start with the end in mind. It really is about leaders have impact. And if you can begin to start with that mindset and really leverage some of the great areas, and they'll be uniquely yours. They'll be uniquely yours through your own lens and your own experiences. The other thing is get the good developmental resources. Early stage managers don't get it, and until we can get large organizations, and I know don't wait for leadership to train you. Make sure you're self-educating. Leverage your resources here at Emory. Leverage colleagues, that are there's just so many people out there that are really able and willing to help you begin to develop as a better leader. So take ownership. The plan and flip the script, you will evolve into a really powerful leader.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, Joy, I'm really glad we got to have the time to talk, and really hopefully this will help a lot of people out there listening to be the boss everyone wants to work for, to be better leaders and to really make an impact in the world.
Sarah, do we have time for a couple of questions?
We do. If you two can stay on the line, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that information. So first question, when you were talking about the shift from being a doer to then a leader, but you're someone who's in a small group and you still have pressure to be a doer because of capacity issues. I know this happens a lot in nonprofits and higher ed. How do you balance that?
For me, it's about prioritizing and understanding what is the work that I must do, what is the work that I like doing but I know I have to let go so that I can build capacity for the people that I lead and serve, and what is the work that I don't really want to do but I still kind of have to do. It's really about prioritizing and then delegating to that, and understanding that yes, I'm going to have to still do the work, the great bosses out there, they do roll up their sleeves and are part of the solution as well and do the work, but they also understand that in order to build capacity for the future, they need to understand how I can let go of some of that work, and instead of doing the work, coaching others to do the work.
I think it's
Jodie, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is your first pivotal negotiation to sit down with your boss and say, I know you want me to lead the group. Let's recalibrate my goals and my responsibilities. I'm now going to have responsibilities. And really understanding what that looks like. I think, again, that helps you kind of set the goal that I think we feel that pressure to produce, and your boss does, but really it's recasting your vision for the role. Just because you got the title doesn't mean we're really clear on what that's going to look like. So I think it's a good time to sit down with your boss and say, hey, thank you so much for the promotion. Now it's recasting a vision for it, even though you're part of the same team, part of the same workload, and you've been handed a promotion. Now you're a leader, and you really have to recast the vision for what's important and how you're going to lead this group forward. So, and I've had clients that have said, hey, we're under a big deadline, and maybe over 30 days we got to get this done, and we come back and do it. But it is about recasting the role and the responsibilities, usually with your leader and then with your team.
Yep, that's great. Anything else, Sarah?
Right. Yes, so we have someone here who would like to know that is it possible to go from a C leader to an A leader in the same organization if you feel that your brand has been tarnished?
Oh, I absolutely.
Yeah, Jodie, why don't you take that one, because I know you have a big passion around that.
Absolutely. This comes from my PR days. Yeah, I mean, I think that if you have burned some bridges or had some difficult relationships, I mean, you do, fresh starts provide a fresh start because nobody knows what it's like. But I think in some ways, comebacks and repositionings and really redeeming yourself is even more powerful. So I have absolutely seen people turn around. I mean, I wouldn't be in the coaching business if I didn't believe that we can transform. And we build new relationships. And when people see that kind of transformation, absolutely, you can go from being, I mean, I think of, my own self. I was a terrible leader, I will admit, because I didn't have good leadership role models. But when you get it along the way and you get the right mentors and the right guidance and the right people begin to see the difference, and they see a big difference. So I say if you're trying to go from a C to an A, go big and really work at it, and people will notice.
That's great.
Right. Great, and we do have some past webinars on personal branding, so maybe check out our archive there. So what do we do? Let's talk about managing up. What do we do if our boss should have attended today's webinar, other than recording?
Boy, isn't that that is a great question in the grand scheme of things. How do I become a great leader if my boss is not such a great
We should do a webinar just on that topic, how to manage up better.
Yeah, I think that would be a great topic for a conversation. Yep. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'll add, and Bill, you can add some commentary. I just say you got to be bigger than, and work at it, just because, one of the things I always say that the leader's job is as a leader, you got to learn to work with people who have a different value system than you. I mean, it just is. You're not going to work with people who see, believe, and operate the way you do. And that this is a great way to lead up. And lead up means you got to really understand, and that's where empathy comes back in. Really try and understand where your boss is coming from, what pressures he's under, what life experiences. And the more you can really seek to understand versus judge, the more powerful you will be. And I had a great client that had his first micromanaging control freak boss, and we spent a year helping him understand it wasn't about him that his boss was, it was about the leader's fear. And if he could help support reducing that fear, he could be more powerful versus reacting to the micromanaging. And, oh, by the way, in a year, it was tough because, you got a lot of scrutiny and a lot of challenges working with difficult bosses. But when he came out of it, he was promoted 3 times faster than his peers because he got to work and said, it's part of my job as a leader to make sure I'm supporting this leader, and didn't let it derail him. And his other colleagues were gossiping and complaining about this new leader, but he just said, look, part of me being a leader is understanding what I need to do with this. And it really made a huge difference. Matter of fact, he made it to officer level in an organization faster than I've ever seen anybody do it. So empathy goes a long way in understanding how do I be successful. If it becomes too much, it's, accept change and vote with your feet. Sometimes you have to find a new leader. So.
Yeah, that's great. Sarah, I really appreciate all the people who've actually stayed past the time. This was great.
Yes, and I know we have to let you all go, so I will end on this great question that I appreciate someone sending in. There's a lot of information out there. I appreciate all the websites and blogs that people are now publishing, but how should we stay on top of the latest research and sort through what's actually valuable on remaining the best boss that everyone wants to work for?
So for me personally, I'm biased. I work here at CCL. You know, we're known for our research. We're a research-based institution, and you know, our mission is to advance the understanding and practice and development of leadership to benefit society worldwide. And we have so many great white papers and blogs and research briefs and all sorts of things that are freely available. So, you know, peruse our website, you know, ccl.org. Follow us on Twitter. We have all sorts of stuff on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and all sorts of different things that help people with tools and tips and tricks and you know, thought leadership. That's the way that I try to stay on top of it. Yeah, I'm in the business of leadership development and research, and I can't stay on top of it as much as I'd like. But following some trusted brands that are out there that really know the things about leadership, following some people that you admire, either whether it be on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever the case may be, there is no one way to be the best leader that's out there. But if you're able to use, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 different really trusted brands or people that you really admire, that's the best way for me to stay on top of things.
I would agree. I say start with things you're passionate about, and one of the things I do every day is I have 3 browsers that open up that I scan, and I scan major academic institutions, and I swap them out, you know, in terms of Emory and Harvard and MIT, and you just find there's just good, you know, or, as you said, institutions that you trust. We love CCL. Everything that comes out from CCL we just know is top rate, and we're very research-based. So, you know, it's finding the sources you think are credible. The second thing is finding publications, magazines, you know, that are relevant to your space. You know, I swap up every year, you know, between Fast Company or Inc. just to keep abreast of trends that we're seeing, and then finding one industry just to kind of stay abreast. But just even that 30 minutes of reading every day, you'll synthesize your own knowledge. There is a lot out there. You have to find the sources you trust and believe in and come to value, because there's no roadmap to leadership. It really is like independent study in college. You got a concept and an idea and a lot of professors out there that you can take advantage of, but you're creating your own coursework. This is your life study. You are an independent study, and it's about you putting it together. And living with that kind of ambiguity is an act of leadership. So find the resources you trust, the people you trust, talk with folks, make your board of advisors, and go forth and be an awesome leader. There's no one way, and it's just in a world of information overload, you just have to narrow and focus and find things that you can manage within the framework of your time.
All right, wonderful. Well, Jodie and Bill, thank you again for joining us today, and thank you to the listeners. Again, you can go back and sort through this great advice and share with your colleagues and your managers on the Emory University YouTube channel. I will send a follow-up email with that information, and follow Bill at lead_better. I'll send you that information too, and how you can find Be the Boss book for your team. So thank you, everyone, and join us again on future webinars. We hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Bill.
Bye.